Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, with another quick painting tutorial for you. What I've done here is I took a 5x7 watercolor card, it's a Strathmore brand, and I've taped it down to a piece of foam core or cardboard on each side, and I've got about 1/4 of an inch or less border. I just wanted a little bit of a frame. And so then after I tape that down, I just run my fingernail over it to make sure that it is stuck down good. That will give us a lovely border when we're done. Now I am going to take a piece of painter's tape, and I prefer the blue painter's tape to regular masking tape just because it's easier to remove from your paper when you're done. But if all you have is masking tape, you can certainly use that. Just be careful when you go to remove it. And I am tearing this tape a little bit thinner because I want a rough edge, and I also want a thinner piece of tape, and this is actually going to be a tree when we're done. So we're going to do a couple techniques today. We're going to do lifting and we're going to do masking. I actually want it a little bit thinner, so I'm going to tear the other side of it. Nice rough tree there, and I can kind of build it in a little bit with my other pieces of tape. Just kind of fatten it out a little bit. Alright, and you want to make sure that you press that down really well. And so when after we're done painting and remove this, we'll have a nice white birch tree left behind. I do have a tutorial on birch trees in my shop. Lindsay Stamp Stuff, which is a great beginner tutorial. And we're going to be doing something similar today, except we're going to focus on the sky a little bit. I also want to mask out some rocks. Masking tape is great for that because you can get some nice angular lines. And I'm actually going to clip my tape in some random pieces and try not to cut myself on at it. I spent the weekend in the White Mountains with my family. We went down to Storyland with everybody else in the world, I think, because it was so busy. I've never been there when it's so busy before, but we had a good time, and it was a great time to drive down there from our home in Maine because the scenery was gorgeous. And we're going to do some of those fall colors today. The first thing I want you to do is, first thing, spray bottle, and you can wet your palette. If you've got a palette of pans of watercolor, just wet it. You should never let finances stop you from painting. There's a great set of watercolors called, by the brand name of Prang. Don't get the washable, get the regular, and they're like $3 a set at Staples. And honestly, you can mix those colors. They're so vivid and bright. They're wonderful. If you find that you really want to paint but you can't afford artist paints, go ahead and get those Prang watercolors. They're wonderful. Alright, I'm going to use some ultramarine blue, and on my wet paper I'm simply adding some to the top of it. Now this paper is not the most expensive paper either. These are the Strathmore watercolor cards, and they're very affordable. I want this to get lighter as I go, so I'm just picking up some clear water. Remember your colors are going to dry lighter, so you want to be darker than you think you want to go at the beginning here. And you just want it to kind of work down and get lighter. So you want a nice gradient. This is a wet into wet gradiated wash. Alright, so while this paper is still wet, we're going to make some clouds. Now, if you have a really nice, crisp, bright fall day and the sky is blue, 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 the clouds you're going to see in the sky are going to be white. There's not really going to be any shading on them, so it's a great time. This is a great technique to do with your watercolor. Just dab out a few clouds, okay? Don't go crazy. You don't want to lift out all that pretty blue sky, but just put a couple clouds in there. You want to make sure that when you're blotting, paper towels work better than rags for this. I will tell you that. I like to use a lot of rags in my studio because I can wash them and reuse them. But for this technique, a paper towel is so much better because it's very absorbent. And you can see how you get a really nice cloud shape. Never rub your wet paper because it will damage it and it will kind of pill up like a cheap sweater. So you don't want to do that. Just put a couple clouds. As you get closer to the bottom of the paper, your cloud should be smaller. So just kind of pinch your towel and just get a couple little dabs like that. I wouldn't overdo it. You want the blue to show through. But it's kind of fun. If you find out that you've taken all your sky away, go paint it again and lift it again till you're happy with it. The reason I use ultramarine blue is because ultramarine blue is sedimentary and it lifts really well. It doesn't stain your paper. So at this point, what I'm going to do is dry my paper with a heat gun, and we'll be back and do the rest of this painting. Alright, right, we're back with a dry painting. Now, something I want to do here, I want to create some depth. So what I'm going to do is on my palette, I'm going to mix out kind of like a grayish purpley color. So I'm going to go with my ultramarine blue, a little bit of alizarin crimson, get a nice purple there. And then if I want to grade that up a little bit, I don't know if I do. A little more blue in there. Yeah, I don't think I need to grade that up anymore. If I did want to gray it up, I'd probably do a little bit of burnt sienna, but I think I'm pretty happy with that. And then I'm going to take my 1-inch flat. I'm using this because I don't want to get in there and get too fussy with it. I want to keep it nice and loose, and I'm going to paint kind of some mountains in the background. This is an imaginary landscape. I'm just kind of pulling it out from my head and just to show you a few techniques. It's not going to win any prizes, but it's going to be it's gonna work. It's gonna look pretty. So I've just loaded up a corner of my brush. See how I'm doing that on the palette? And I'm just brushed with the full width of my brush so that I kind of get those mountains in the distance. All right, and we're gonna let that part of the paper dry, and we're gonna work up here. Now I want to have the look of maybe a few trees, kind of like maybe we're at the edge of the forest or we're peeking out over a meadow or off a cliff or something. So I've just got a plain old sponge. And I am just going to grab some lovely autumn colors. And I think I'll start with a little cad red with my sponge. And I'm just going to kind of dab some in there. It's not bright enough. I need a little more color in my sponge. Just put a little bit in there. Pretend that tree's not there and go right on over it. But these trees will be in the background. I'm going to grab some sap green. I have to say, with the palettes like this, usually I should be using my big palette with my artist colors, but this will be fine just because it's easier to get a sponge in around on some of those. And I could dab some down here while I'm at it. And let's see, maybe a little bit of yellow, cad yellow, nice warm yellow. It can mix some of these other colors and create some fun stuff too. All right, now that's still a little wet there. So what I'm going to do is dry this, and I'm going to remove the tape, and we'll see what we have. So I'm just going to dry it and come right back. You always want to make sure your paper is perfectly dry before you attempt to remove any masking tape. And the best way I found to remove the masking tape is to kind of pull it. Look how, let me show you on this side. You want to pull it kind of like this. So it's kind of like laying back flat on itself. For some reason, that just keeps it from ripping the paper a little easier. And that came off with no trouble. I'm going to leave the rocks that I masked off there. And what I'm going to do is start working on painting this birch tree. And I want my, oh, this is stuck to my tape. I want a 1/2 inch flat. And I'm going to mix up some gray using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna right here on my palette. So let's get some burnt sienna there, which is a nice orangey brown. And the blue is the opposite of orange, so it just makes a really great, great shadow color. That mixed up, keep going back and forth until you get the shade that you like. There, see how it's getting nice and gray? That's what you want. And rather than using black from the tube, this is going to match my painting because it's colors I plan on using or have already used in my picture. Alright, so I haven't really established a light source here. I guess I'll put my light source to this side since this is where the clearing is. More sunlight would probably be hitting this way. And I'm going to do what's called side loading, the same thing we did for our mountains. I have wet my brush, just blotting it gently. I'm going to pick up color on one side of it, and on that side, that's where my shadow is going to be. I am going to go up the edge of this birch tree. You can reload as you need to, just reload on that side of the brush. Don't worry if it's not perfectly even. Now I'm going to go in and add some splotches of color here and there, kind of disguise my little places where the paint had run. And then I'm going to use my credit card, my old cut-up credit card that you see me use all the time. And I'm going to just dip it into some of the paint and just going to streak it across. And that gives you that beautiful papery texture that birch trees have. I've got birch trees growing in my yard. You know, we see a lot of birch trees up here. I saw a lot when we were driving because they stand up so nicely. They stand up really well in the fall because the other trees have changed color and a lot of trees are bare and they just really stand out. And then I can go in and kind of scrape and pull paint around with the sharp edge of my credit card. I'm telling you, you couldn't buy a tool that works better than an old credit card for painting and adding texture. Alright, now I want to give this tree some branches, and you'll notice on birch trees they tend to have darker branches. So what I'm going to do, and you can either use a liner brush, which remember the brushes have the longer bristles are liners. This is a number 4 Scepter Gold. It's a great brush. Or you can use your number 6 round, or use whatever you have that's got a nice point on it. And I want to pick up some of that nice dark, and I'm just going to vary the way I hold my brush, maybe twist it, lift it, and put some branches in there. I know they look a little stark right now, but don't worry, we'll get them integrated into our painting. All right, and then we want to put some leaves, and birch trees tend to have these kind of yellowy leaves, and I'm going to use a regular round brush for that. Yeah, where'd that brush go? I just had it. It was stuck to my thing a minute ago. Here we go. And I'm going to use some cadmium yellow, the same yellow we used to sponge on there. We're just going to kind of tap a few leaves on there. Go right in front of the tree too, because trees don't just have branches out to the left and right, they are right on top as well. And I might put a few sap green leaves in there just to give it a little vibrancy. They could be from other trees, they could be leaves that haven't turned yet on this tree. We don't know, but it's fine. And then with this round brush, we'll add it with a sap green. I'm going to add some colorful grasses, some nice bright fresh green grasses that haven't been killed by the fall yet. And then I'm going to darken that up with a little ultramarine blue. Add some more contrasty grasses. Alright, now I want to give this a little bit of life here. I want to maybe put some shrubs in there, so I'm going to go back in with my sponge. And I think I'm going to pick up some yellow ochre and some burnt sienna to get some old dried up shrub looking foliage there. I'm loading both colors right next to each other on my sponge. I'm just going to sponge it in there. I want some texture here. And add a little bit of green to that, I think, my sap green. This sap green, I notice, is a little bit brighter than the other sap greens that I'm used to using. I think I like a little bit darker of a sap green, or richer of a color. But sometimes when you're using the student grade, like this is Cotman, student grade paints just have a little bit less vibrancy. But I think this will be nice and vibrant for our purposes. I'm going to throw in some red grasses here. Or shrubs, you know, we don't have to know exactly what they are. We're just throwing in some interest. This is the cadmium red here. It's our warm red. And maybe a few brown, which really aren't going to look that much different than the red. And then maybe just a few little shrub bits that have lost their leaves that are just trying to make a living here. And then with my scraper tool I can add even more lovely shapes. I got one kid down here with me. Lila, would you go up and tell Maisie I'm doing a video and I'll be right there? Real life, folks, real life. Okay, and let's see, we're going to dry this and remove our tape and be right back, and I'll also see what sort of commotion is going on upstairs. Okay, I'm back. I've settled the who owns these boots dispute from my twins, and I'm back to finish this painting. I have let everything dry, and now I'm going to remove the tape that we stuck down here to become rocks. But you know they were going to turn into rocks, did you? Well, you probably had no inkling. I think I mentioned that before. My kids are off school today. They had a 4-day weekend. We got back from New Hampshire yesterday, and they have a in-service day. Their teachers have an in-service day. All right, I want to warm these rocks out, and I want to show you another technique. Remember the clouds? We called that lifting. Well, there's another way to lift. You can take your brush, and you can paint over an area you've already painted, and you can remove a lot of that paint. Now, most of the colors we've used today are what is known as sedimentary, and those are inorganic colors. They come from usually minerals like iron oxides, so your ultramarine blue comes from lapis lazuli, which is a mineral. Your yellow ochre and your burnt sienna come from iron. These colors don't tend to stain your paper, and they come up. Now you can see a little bit of staining from that sap green. That must have a dye in it. So those colors, cadmium reds, cadmium yellows, those are going to lift off really easily from your paper, whereas colors like alizarin crimson, any your more vivid colors, more dye-based colors, they are going to sink in. If they're an organic color, they come from like a plant, then they're more likely to sink in and stain your paper. So just a little something to keep in mind if you think you might want to go back to the white of your paper after you've painted. So I'm going to grab a little yellow ochre because I want to warm up those rocks. The beautiful fall sun is hitting them and warming it up. I love the golden light of fall. It's so pretty. And I'm also going to go in with some of that gray that we made and add some of that in there too. And I'm going to go in with my lovely, very fabulous, awesome tool called the Cut Up Credit Card, and I'm going to scrape in some cracks in the rocks and get some texture in there. And any of these lines that I scrape in will not be able to be lifted. They will stay there for the duration. And so I've warmed that up. I've added some color, maybe a little bit of brown on there. You can use whatever brush. I like to use, if I'm doing something flat and hard like a rock, I like to use a brush that's flat. So I try to match the shape of my brush to what I am trying to paint. I'm going to get a little bit of that cooler gray in there. And a little bit of just rusty brown or burnt sienna. Not too much, just a little bit. Now, let me, yeah, I think I probably ought to dry that because anything I add next to that is going to, actually, I think we can let it dry. Maybe we'll go in there. What are we at for time? We're at 16 minutes there. Maybe go in and define our branches a little bit better. A little bit of, make them a little bit darker there. I can add any detail on the tree that I want. Any darker spots. Yeah, I can go back in with a credit card and do that. Because I want to have a little bit of contrast there. I want it to look natural, but I also want the birch tree to be kind of the star of this painting. I know I did this video to show you skies, and we did that, but I thought just the sky on its own on a card would be a little dull, so we're going to go in and put some of these shapes on the tree, make that stand out. So with my credit card, I cut it so that I've got a small end and a big end. I can go in with my small end and add the little knots and torn bark places and places where branches were. I can go in and put all that stuff in with the small end of my card here. All right, I am going to go dry that, come back, and we're going to put the finishing touches on, and we will have a finished painting. All right, it's finishing touches time. I'm going to go back in with my little credit card scraper. I'm going to throw in some of the details in the rocks down here. Give me some nice, lovely texture. And I'm going to clean it up with a round brush. Just kind of go in there and define. So you don't really, the nice thing about the credit card is that you get that lovely undefined, rough, rocky texture, but I also want to go in there and kind of push it around exactly where I want it to go. I'm going to add some little bits of grass peeking out from behind those rocks, and a little bit of sap green and ultramarine there, just a little bit, just to show that there's a little bit something else in back there. Gives it a little bit more believability. I want to spatter some of the leaf colors in there. I'm using a toothbrush, and I'm going to get some cadmium red and just give it a, see how I do this? I kind of point in the direction I want my spatter to go, and I'm just going to spatter it. Maybe I'll just use my hands to mask off the rocks and just a little bit of spatter in there. A little burnt sienna would look nice there too. I like the spatters. If you don't like this, don't do it, okay? You don't have to do that. And now that really finishes our painting. That's a little bright. I'm going to blot that. Anything that's bright, just blot it with your tissue. And then we remove the tape to show the beautiful white frame, and I really think that finishes a watercolor. When I was a kid, I always did that with my watercolor paintings, and I just couldn't wait to take off the tape and see that beautiful white frame. And sometimes I still do it. So, oops, see that I ripped that. I didn't pull it very carefully, so I kind of ripped it on the edge a little bit there. That's all right. It's not really going to matter that much. But you really wouldn't want to do that in the middle of your painting. So there we have it, a nice finished lovely card. I want to thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.